Fireside chat. We're going to have two amazing people on stage. I'm going to invite, first of all, Sten Tamkivi here, who is going to be interviewing Andrew. I think Sten doesn't really need any introduction. He's well known in Estonia, talking about different subjects. And as I know that he's been on a lot of stages, actually, and it's not going to be, he's had a long training to do these things. But actually, what probably people don't know about him, and he doesn't know it yet that I know, is that you, when was the very first time you were on stage? When did you start your stage career?
I have no idea. Wow.
Might have it been on the stage of Vanemuine?
Oh, yeah.
So this time probably not going to be a singing presentation, but actually interviewing Andrew. And as said, you have decades of experience working with startups together. And as Sten said, you move back and forth from Estonia to Silicon Valley, and apparently along the way you met each other as well. So that's how you ended up on this stage as well. So thank you very much. The stage is yours.
Great. Thank you, Andy, for joining us today, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. Andy is not a household name in Estonia, even though he should be, yet. So just a few words for background. This man here, he's the CEO and co-founder of Proteus Digital Health, which is a huge medical innovation company that we'll probably talk a little bit more about later. He's also a founder and the board member at Summit Schools, which is a very sort of forward-looking initiative how the educational system should change, and it's forward-looking enough that, among others, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates have funded this thing. Then there are two foundations or two centers for digital humanities that Andy and their family have set up as a sort of a goodwill project, and one of them is at Stanford and the other one at Cambridge University, so both of the places of academia that you probably have heard about as well. And then one thing that we have in common is the Estonian Museum of Occupations, or Vabamu, as it's going to be very soon be called. So where I wanted to start this conversation is really that if you look at topics like humanities and health and education, this for many people, these are regarded as the sort of the soft topics. And in all of them, you very distinctly have a sort of a technology angle into them. Like, can you explain a little bit, or like tell us the big picture?
Okay, Sten, thank you. I'm going to start actually by talking about libraries. Libraries are at the core of many of the most successful companies of the digital era. And let's just start with an obvious one, Google. Its main claim to fame is its ability to index information and make it highly searchable. It's got great analytics, great applications. It's a fantastically successful library. How about Amazon? Started with a library of books. It's now a catalog of commerce. Apple, massive music and media empire built on the back of a library of songs. Okay, so this theme of libraries is a really, really powerful one, and it's all about taking content, making it digital, add analytics, applications, make it much easier for consumers to get access, create much more value, make innovation much more sustainable, and make professionals much more productive. That's what, in my view, much of the digital economy is all about. And I'll relate it back then to the things that you talked about that I'm involved in. If you look at what we do at Proteus Digital Health, we're taking a library, one of the most important libraries in all of healthcare, drugs. We turn them into digital objects so that when you swallow them, they turn on and talk to your cell phone, and they put on your phone information about what you've swallowed and how your body is responding. So we're making drugs into digital content. We add analytics, we add applications, we engage consumers and empower them.
So just to make it very clear, you put the chip in a pill.
We make essentially a new category of hardware that's made out of ingredients you'd find in your diet that enables us to make a drug, a digital object that is powered by your body, will turn on when you swallow it. That's a very neat piece of technology.
Just absorb that, pun intended.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, but so look, drug, digital content, applications, analytics, empower the consumer, make it easier for doctors to do their job and have the data they need to make decisions. If you go to Summit Schools, similar thing. We take a library of educational materials, turn it into digital content. We make it much easier for students to learn, making use of their mobile phone, make it much better for the professional learning guides to actually manage a classroom. Same thing at Stanford universities. They take libraries of really important content, books, maps, songs, bones even, turn it into digital content, put applications on top, make it easier for researchers to figure out what's going on, make their faculty more productive. It's all the same thing. Very big theme.
So, and in case of the Stanford and Cambridge institutions and Summit Schools, there still is a physical space as well. So.
Absolutely. And so, look, it's worth pointing out that many people say that the future will be digital, and they focus very much on the pure digital side of life. What I'd say is that it's very difficult for physical institutions to go digital, but digital institutions will go physical, and the future is actually what I'm going to call digical. It's a combination of digital services and products tied to very familiar physical objects.
So we're sitting in a physical space, and that happens to be in Tallinn, Estonia. What's your relation, doing all these digital things, what's your relation to Estonia?
Yeah, actually, by the way, in this physical space, I'm just wondering, where's the fire? Because this was supposed to be a fire. Anyway, never mind, just a little point there. Okay, so my mother-in-law was Estonian, and she escaped in the 1940s. She was a great, great patriot. She really strongly believed in the cause of Estonian freedom. Big family here. In 1990, when I got married, we had more Estonians at our wedding than Americans. We were married in Switzerland. Actually, they were really got to know them. I mean, they could party hard. They got to be known at our wedding as the Rolling Estonians. And so I've been married now for nearly 30 years. I've been getting to know the country all that time. In 2003, Olga helped establish the Occupations Museum in Tallinn. And then in 2010, she and her husband Walter funded a program at Stanford in Baltic Studies with the idea that we could build a structural connection between the museum and Estonia and Silicon Valley, and really build on this idea that Estonia was becoming the most digital country in the world.
So you have a very special perspective on Estonia, because like most of the tech people hanging out here who might come from the US, they've sort of discovered Estonia in the last few years because of the e-residency or some startup that they met, and now somebody dragged them over, and it's quite fresh and new for you. You having seen Rolling Estonians since the 90s, like how has that relationship changed? Like in the beginning it was probably just weird, but what is it now, and what are the things around the museum, and what?
Yeah, so I'll make some comments here. So when we first came back to Estonia in the 1990s, just after the wall came down, this was a very challenged place, and we came the first times with big bags full of food and clothing and things that people needed because our family didn't have very much. Right. Things changed in this country amazingly quickly, and so by 4 or 5 years after 1990, there was a Stockman in Tallinn, and people didn't need anything because they'd figured out how to get ahead, and so the country really developed very quickly, and that was very obvious. And so we had a sort of personal view of that. And then I'll say, maybe about 10 years ago, I started doing quite a bit of work with the World Economic Forum, first as a technology pioneer, then as the CEO of a global growth company, and then more recently as a forum advisor in North America. And so one of their main themes is the fourth industrial revolution in the digital economy. And I get to participate in lots of conversations about that with the forum. And so I started to be on panels and in meetings where the guy sitting next to me was called Thomas Ilves. And we would start to chat, and I got to know him pretty well. And then I started to meet people from the Estonian diaspora who were really, really terrific tech entrepreneurs, people like Taavi Kotka, and then there was this guy called Sten Tamkivi. And so it became very clear that Estonia was moving very quickly, and that although I lived in Silicon Valley, there were many people in Estonia doing really excellent leading-edge work. And then there was this little company called Skype that popped out and became very prominent. So I found myself in these settings talking about things like dual authenticated IDs, e-citizenship, digital embassies, putting a mobile or a prescription on a mobile phone, casting a vote on a smartphone, and I realized I'm just talking about Estonia all the time. And by the way, audiences really, really eat it up, because these are things that are highly relevant in many, many countries.
Right. But why is that? Like, have you developed a theory? Like, is there anything in the water here, or like?
So let's just comment on digital innovation and how it works. Silicon Valley is the epicenter of the most digital innovation in the world because it has the highest concentration of high-trust networks. And innovation happens in high-trust networks. One of the problems with innovation is how you get it from the production function into the commercial or adoption function. And that's a problem because often the high-trust networks have to meet low-trust networks. And low-trust networks are things like regulators. So the FDA, for example, is designed to be a low-trust network. Everybody who pays for healthcare is a low-trust network. People who regulate access to the roads are a low-trust network. One of the really interesting aspects of Estonia as a small country is that you have a higher capacity of trust than you might have in a larger country. And that higher amount of trust and potentially lower regulatory barrier has enabled you to more quickly adopt many innovations that have struggled in other countries. And so think about Uber. I just saw a video here where you were advertising that you move at the speed of Tesla and that you'll be the first to, or this country will be the first to legalize self-driving cars. It's all an example of high trust and the ability to work with technology companies, and it's a big advantage.
But that's a fascinating point because Estonians in the audience probably agree that inside the country the trust level is high, and usually it's because you know everybody. Like if they weren't in your class in high school, probably somebody in your class knows them, kind of that level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the internal market is so tiny, and when you conquer the global markets, then you have to sort of penetrate the low-trust networks outside. Like, do you think that this Estonia sitting in the sort of comfort bubble of high-trust networks actually inhibits this?
No, because the key here is, to be successful, you have to develop not just the technical capabilities, but the human system and organizational capabilities to make things work. And so Estonia is a fantastic learning lab for much of that work. And I'm personally a fan of some of the writings of guys like Geoffrey Moore and Peter Thiel. I'll use the Peter Thiel example here of 0 to 1. If you're doing something that's never been done before, a 0 to 1 company, then it's really important to do it in a very focused way and make it work really well. And the example that Peter describes in his book, that I'll just sort of paraphrase quickly here, is he invested in Facebook well after MySpace was a big company, and people just laughed and said, that's ridiculous. Why are you investing in a social network for Harvard students? Well, Peter's point is, okay, Harvard students, and we'll exquisitely satisfy them, AKA, let's say that's Estonia, all right? If we can really satisfy Harvard students, let's just go for the Ivy League. And if we can do the Ivy League, then let's go for college kids. Okay, now let's go for young people. Okay, now let's go for some older demographics. Now let's just do the whole world. And what Facebook learned to do systematically was to exquisitely satisfy customers and to build out systems that worked really well. And they started in a very small and focused way. No reason why lots of other companies can't do that, and they could do it starting in a small country like Estonia.
What could be examples of that? Now, let's zoom out of Estonia, but still keep Estonia kind of on the radar there. Like, in all your initiatives that you're working on, can you bring examples where there are global problems, burning problems that need to be solved, which Estonia should tackle because we have this sort of contained way of running these experiments?
Yeah, so a few things that I think are really important. First of all, I think it's great in this country to start to think about and focus on freedom as a theme. In part because it's very important to this country, but in part also because the digital revolution coincided with a moment in time when the world became structurally more free than at any other time in human history. When you look at what happened in the 1990s and you point to the great startups, you can point to Google and Amazon, but you can point to another great startup called Estonia that happened to get free and embrace this digital revolution and become a very successful country. And so within this idea of freedom, cyber defense is an area where, and cybersecurity is an area where Estonia is already a leader. And so Marina Kaljurand was the person who persuaded NATO foreign ministers last year that alongside air, sea, and land, you should have cyber, and that you should have a cyber joint chiefs. And Estonia is the only country in the world right now that has a cyber defense league with a guy sitting alongside the. So that's a great area of innovation, and it will be an area where there will be both public and private innovations in the same way that, for example, jet planes in America are made by private companies. And so cyber defense will be a great area, I think, for Estonian companies to lead. But you can look across the whole landscape, social, economic, political, military, and say these are all areas where there's massive potential for digital innovation and where Estonians can make a big contribution. We're very, very early in this arc. I'll just make another sort of historical comparison. If you think about mobile connectivity as a new utility, it is in some ways analogous to electricity, which was the big new utility of the last century. And if you look at the arc of electricity and what it did in that period, and you imagine that we've got something that spread much faster to many more people, we are literally in the first minute of the first hour of a 50 to 100 year cycle. It's very big and very new.
I'm trying to pull more examples out of you, like healthcare, digital health. What is the thing that nobody else in no other country can do that Estonia should try?
Well, Estonia's got a big digital bank of genetic information. So the integration of, for example, phenotypic and genotypic information along with EMRs, that would be an area that Estonia could go after. I think in financial services, you're already seeing Estonian entrepreneurs dealing with things like how to transfer money. I think mobile payments is a huge opportunity, and you only have to look at what's just happened in India, where the government is structurally trying to move people away from cash towards digital finance to see that that's another really important area. Now, it's rather more challenging for a country of 1 billion people to go cold turkey into mobile money than it would be a country like Estonia, but I think that could be really cool, and that could really carve a path for other countries in the world.
So which of those initiatives do you personally plan to get behind? Like, do you want to plug anything? Is there anything in the works?
So I'm a healthcare guy. I've been in healthcare for 30 years. So I'm perfectly happy to be behind the integration of genetic and phenotypic information to create much better health access and better healthcare. I think I know enough about that not to completely lose my shirt. I think if I got into mobile money, I might be in trouble.
Okay. But I think the other fascinating point that you made is this notion of freedoms. And that's, when I joined the board of the Museum of Occupations, that raised a few eyebrows, and I got a bit of bashing in public as well, because now, somebody's turning that into startup. But actually, I think it's a super important topic, and I want to spend a little bit of time and get your perspective on that. And the point is that you see in these halls, over the 2 days, you see a whole bunch of people with sparkling eyes and the wish to make things happen, but you also see the sort of first generation of Estonians who have made it happen. They went out, they built their first company, they've maybe exited their first company, they've done stuff. And I think a huge difference in how sort of in young capitalist societies versus, for example, established free market societies like US and Silicon Valley in particular, how people relate to the notion of giving back and contributing to the society and sort of thinking of a broader social mission beyond their own company or own wallet. So you obviously and your family have done so many things out of altruism and sort of this joy of giving besides that. And Museum of Occupations is one of them here, which I hope becomes a platform. But do you want to share a little bit about that philosophy of why do you do this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Here's what I'd say. And it's a very, very important debate now amongst tech elites, because what you hear a lot is that many people are becoming very, very wealthy in this new era of technology, and that's true, and there are really significant concerns that many other people may be left behind. That's also true. I'll make a few comments on that. The first is that the real power of digital tools is to emancipate people who have little education, little access, little money, to emancipate countries that have little power economically or physically. And so I believe very strongly that that's an important part of the digital revolution, but it has to be conscious. It won't happen automatically. So that would be the first point. The second point is that many tech elites have bought into a philosophy of society that's about rights and about what I'm going to call positive rights, rights to healthcare, rights to education. I think that's okay, but a little dangerous. I'd much prefer to build a philosophy that's about obligations. If you have the incredible good fortune to, and the good luck to make a lot of money in a capitalist society, maybe because you're clever, but often because of a time or a place or a circumstance, then you have an obligation to start to think about how you use that resource to make your country or the place you live a better place. All societies are capitalist. All of them. The only difference is who gets to allocate the capital. If you happen to have personally a lot of it, then you do the most important job in any society, which is to figure out how to make investments to make it a better place. Some of that's going to be financial investing to make money, and some of it's going to be non-financial investing to do things that are about a social purpose. But if you have that privilege, then you have that obligation.
I think I like how you kind of describe it as a continuum. I think there's like people in tech when they start looking at how they can contribute back to the community, a former entrepreneur very often becomes an angel investor. Mm-hmm. Like that's something for financial gain, but it's like financial gain plus. It's mm-hmm. like also enablement of the community and right. helping younger people to do the same, right?
Yep.
And you kind of see that the non-profit activities for you are like just sliding down that continuum.
It's all about investing.
Okay.
It's all investing, but it's investing for either social or financial purpose or both.
Right. So the non doesn't mean nothing there.
No.
Okay.
No.
Great. We have a few minutes reserved for questions from the audience. There's one here? Thanks, Andy.
The catch box.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Hi, I'm originally from Portugal. I've lived here in Estonia for 10 years. I'm really excited about the innovations here. I wanted to change the topic just a little bit. I was recently in Lebanon, and I saw a lot of refugees coming from Syria. And because the government there doesn't have the support to deal with them, they don't have any bureaucracy to deal with them. So the refugees just come and they start setting up their own businesses because they need the money to support. So there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit coming from refugees in those countries. Then again, if refugees come to Europe, countries like Germany and Sweden, very high levels of bureaucracy, they're not so free to start their own businesses. Therefore, they drain the systems. They drain the social security from those countries. Right. Which is kind of interesting because for me the perfect system would be one where they are allowed to come in and they immediately can start their own businesses because that's what they want to do. They want to support themselves and at the same time contribute to the taxation of the country. And I just thought, can Estonia show something in the way of a solution with their, either the e-residency or the low bureaucracy level that they have? Can Estonia help to solve the problem of refugees coming to let's say European countries or other countries, and to promote the entrepreneurship that they already have built in because they want to be self-sufficient and at the same time contribute to the country where they move instead of draining the coffers of the state?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm going to just answer it thematically. The challenge here is it's very difficult to be an immigration society and a social equity society. Europe historically for a long time has been about social equity, and these are very strong constructs. America, by contrast, is much more an immigrant society, and it's much less about social equity and much more about getting on with it and getting something done. Europe is struggling with the idea of how you have a social equity society embrace migrants. And America is struggling with how you have a migrant society embrace social equity. But they're both struggling with the same issue. And I don't think there's a magic bullet, and I don't think that Estonia will suddenly find it much easier than the Swedes or the Dutch to deal with this issue. It's a very complicated one that is deeply ingrained in the social psyche of the people that live in these places.
I think just to add to that, and it's a super interesting way you compared Europe and the US here, one thing that the Estonian e-residency guys are already doing, which they talked about yesterday, it's projects with the United Nations and Jack Ma from Alibaba to give business enablement for anybody on the planet. And I think that could be one of the hacks that we could deploy, which would be the most Estonian way of doing things. It's like, what if you detach the physical location and physical security from ability to work and use sort of technology and internet to, like we can make them e-residents, they can be in a safe place, not like all over, but still sort of start earning their income and improving their lives.
Right, that's a great point.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, Uwe here. So you mentioned high trust systems, that this is what runs Estonia, much like it does Silicon Valley, but could you elaborate on what do you see as a high trust system? Because at face value, you could also say that Estonia, much like America, has a very individualist sort of society, not a collective one like we have in the Mediterranean. So how would you reconcile this individualist yet trusting environment?
Yeah, so I'll make some observations. Estonian culture is very non-hierarchical. At least that's my observation. When I've been here and I've watched, for example, people who lead the government just hang out at, for example, the Laulupidu, it's a very non-hierarchical society. People are very comfortable around each other and with each other. I don't observe that Estonians are particularly scornful of failure or people who try and don't succeed. These are all things that would be very common in Silicon Valley. It doesn't appear that in Estonia you get much credit for having a lot of money. That's also a really good thing, and it's also true in Silicon Valley. If you start boasting about your bank account, people are going to roll their eyes and laugh at you because everyone's got more than you have. And if they haven't, then they don't care because it's not how much money you have, it's actually what you do with it that matters. And so I think these are things that speak to people's social responsibility, and I think it speaks to their ability to trust each other. So I think those are some of the characteristics that make Estonia more like Silicon Valley and less like other places.
How does that work? Like, what's the mechanism of innovation there?
Well, once you have a high trust network, it's very simple. It works because people take risk. The absolute key is that in a low trust network, nobody will take any risk because they're going to get condemned.
Right. And we have time for the last question here.
I think Estonia has some really cool things like digital prescription for medication in America.
Yep.
It's mostly fax and like phone calls and so on.
Yep.
Also, the blockchain technology for the e-healthcare. What would need to happen in America for these innovations to be implemented?
Yeah, a lot. So if I said to you that, look, I have the good fortune or misfortune of working in healthcare in the United States. It has some of the largest, most structurally low-trust networks you could possibly imagine, starting with the Food and Drug Administration. On the one hand, it's excellent, and the whole world relies on it. On the other hand, it takes years to get a drug approved or a medical device approved, and then beyond that, you've got to get it paid for. So a lot will have to change in America, for example, to enable digital prescriptions to happen. I think it's important to note that there are other places in the world that can follow Estonia probably more quickly. Look at China, look at India. These are countries that are not just talking about leapfrogging, they are leapfrogging. India's just leapfrogged on money. China's about to leapfrog on medicine. They are going to relicense their entire basic drug supply. And so I wouldn't necessarily look at the United States and say, how will they copy us? Because it's very established and there are many vested interests that will be getting in the way. Other countries, not so much.
Thank you. Usually, when I have the privilege of having dinner with Andy, I wouldn't book less than 4 hours because the conversations are so interesting. I'm so happy that we could share a glimpse into this interesting man's head, but this is all the time we have today.
Thank
so
you,
thank
Sten.
you, Andy, for that.
Thanks.